Welcome to MacroMicroCosm Book Review. Today we are reviewing the rhetoric-bound book about authorship, Several Short Sentences About Writing by Verlyn Klinkenborg, published by Vintage Books, a division of Random House. It's true that the simplest revision is deletion, but there's often a fine sentence lurking within a bad sentence, a better sentence hiding under a good sentence, Klinkenborg writes on page 112. The most enduring advice in Klinkenborg's editorial masterpiece is one single reductionist word: confidence. Trust your writerly instinct, an instinct every writer can hone, by reading several short sentences about writing. Approaching Verlyn Klinkenborg's Several Short Sentences About Writing is best done with any preconceptions set firmly aside. Open the pages and your eyes are peppered with sentences left aligned on the page in no particular paragraphical structure. They are truly a collection of several short sentences about writing. I don't think I'll get tired of saying that title. I hope not. This is where Klinkenborg lives. In the space between effective literature and the disillusion of the established academic writing system. Torn down are the legions of outlines, structures, and beginning to ending writing systems. In this book there is no system at all, nor should there be. In the alignment of the stanza-esque collections of sentences, we see the physical breakdown of structures built to hold us back. Structures meant to tell us all growing up that writing isn't very much fun if you think about it. That there's a seriousness and academic austerity meant to delight in leather patches on plaid jersey sports coats. The waning descent of stodgy academia frees our minds to unlock the instinct we had once as children and can reclaim if we follow the hungry wonder of a childlike voracious desire to read. This is not an easy path, Klinkenborg reminds us on page 98. Above all, you'll have to teach yourself to be patient. And on page 100, postpone the search for order, for the single line through the piece. Let your thoughts collide and see what they dislodge. Write them in your head, he seems to say. Stop and think about it before you even consider picking up a pen or putting your fingers next to the keyboard. Like Mozart's compositions before a performance. Wait until the sentences are crafted, reduced and crafted again, until they burst to be written out. Wait until you have the first right sentence, then the next. Halt if you have to. Find what needs destroying and be glad in its passing. See where your instincts lead. I remember my grade 12 English class. It was the summer after passing grade 11, and my favorite teacher was leaving for another school. He offered the course before he left, and I leapt at it. We read Bertrand Russell, Philip K. Dick, watched films like AI, Artificial Intelligence, and Blade Runner after reading stories like We Will Remember It For You wholesale, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and my favorite, Johnny Mnemonic. He put forth Amadeus, and I sat wrapped to the school's bulky black television in the years before widescreen or LED screens. It was there I burned the image of a fictional version of Mozart, smiling unsullied by the blatant worry on the musicians' faces as they begged for their parts to be written out. Scripted, finally. It didn't matter that the symphony was already in his head. It needed to be transcribed for future generations, or just this one performance where desperate violinists waited for their copy and the crowds filtered in. Brilliance was an application of Mozart's mind, and here Klinkenborg brings us back to the potential brilliance in all our writerly community. We should percolate and think first. Let the structure come as it does, one sentence at a time. One thought worth holding on to. What Several Short Sentences About Writing gives me is the grace to allow development over time. Klinkenborg frees his readers by form alone, paragraphs reading more like poetry or scriptural psalms to the higher creative instinct. It's a book of short sensations built against academic outline straitjackets and into the place of near-Platonic ideal creative space. A book succinct and pregnant of promise, not through a 1-2-3 formula, but of chaos. Through the release of formula and standard writing. Several Short Sentences About Writing is a release. The cork pulled from a wine never to run dry in those writers who read it. I cannot help being back in that summer English class, all 11 of us students hoping to get ahead on our provincial exams by doing one early. Mr. R. took me aside one afternoon and placed a dog-eared copy of William Gibson's Count Zero in my hand. Said I should love the book, like I left Johnny Mnemonic. Little did he know that he was creating a moment of inception in a youth who, until then, only experienced science fiction through Star Trek and C.S. Lewis's Paralandra trilogy. I fell madly into cyberpunk, and to this day, William Gibson remains my favorite author of all time, on par with my beloved Keats and Carol S. Pearson. When writers ask me for advice, which, granted, I am still seeking in my own burgeoning career, I lead them to a cadre of books by authors much more learned than myself, the way Mr. R. led me to the freedom of William Gibson and the frenetic Amadeus. Annie Dillard's A Writer's Life, Carol S. Pearson's A Hero Within, and Sophie Burnham's For Writers Only. Several short sentences about writing will now complete that list, alpha and omega of writers lit for writers. If you have an interest in writing at all, this work by Verlyn Klinkenborg is the first and often last you should read. I close off my review by reading a final passage from page 169 and 170 from several short sentences about writing. Reading these sentences and my commentary on them, you will be tempted to side with the writer, to think, I know what he means, or I can see what she's saying. But that's because it feels so normal to try to deduce the meaning of the sentence instead of observing what its words actually say. We're so trained to read for meaning, to look through the sentence to what we think is the author's intention, that in our search for it, we are prepared to disregard the literal significance of the prose itself. You may also be tempted to say maybe the writer wants it that way, but you can only judge intentionality in context. If all the sentences in a piece are clear and sharp, then perhaps we can say that a slightly aberrant sentence is intentional, but there seems to be a reason for it. But if many of the sentences in a piece are unclear, ambiguous, or weak, we have to assume that intention is irrelevant, indiscernible at best. We have to assume that the writer lacks control. This has been a MacroMicroCosm book review of several short sentences about writing by Verlyn Klinkenborg, published by Vintage Books, a division of Random House. The paperback copy I used for this review was purchased by myself at Powell's Books in Portland, Oregon. If you have a book you would like to be reviewed, please visit our website www.vræydamedia.ca/macromicrocosm. Our next review title will be announced on our Twitter at MacroMicroCosm, and if you would like to support MacroMicroCosm Literary Journal, please consider purchasing our quarterly journal, joining our Patreon for exclusive interviews and stories, follow us on social media, or subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or Podbean, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for weekly reviews. That was a lot. I think I'll make it much more concise next time. Thank you for your time, and have a fantastically creative day.